everyone. I am Camille Miller, the founder and executive director of the Natural Life Business Partnership, and you are joining us today on Ask the Expert on NLBP TV. Today we have our guests, Nevin Eckert, independent researcher, educator, and advocate, and Dr. Carly Nuday, PhD. She is the author of The Science of Health, Consciousness, and Enlightenment, Water Codes. This is her book. And they are both partners in TrueSpring Water Quality Solutions. Thank you both for joining us today.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So we're talking today about rethinking drinking water quality and its connection to optimal health. I will say that it first came into understanding your work when I linked in with Nevin, and I forget how that conversation started, and then he started sending me stuff on water quality, or I made a comment on something that you wrote. I don't know how it started, but then you started sending me stuff, and I said, hey, you should be on our podcast so we can talk to others about water quality and what they do and don't know, and about all the toxins and how things are changing in our quality. My background is in organic farming, so I learned quickly about what uptake was into your food and how that affects everything. So I wanted to start with, well, a little bit about water, but I also want to talk about the difference between structured water and regular water. But why don't we start up, either one of you can start, just about a little bit of a background of how you got into water, and some of the research and how you got here today. We'll talk about all your research, but how you got here, how you started.
You go ahead and start, Carly.
Okay. I got into water quality and specifically structured water when I was dealing with EMF sensitivity. I needed to understand what was happening in my body and why all the tools that I had gained through studying natural and alternative medicine was unable to help me. And it eventually led on sort of a winding trail to structured water, and I found what I was looking for. I also have a theological, spiritual background, and water also came up in my research when I was looking for unifying concepts between multiple modalities and belief systems.
Okay. And Nevin, how about you?
Oh, goodness. I'm trying to keep it brief, but, you know, it was back in late 1994, and I discovered the life work of Victor Schauberger, who was known as the Water Wizard. He lived from 1885 to 1958, and just fascinated me discovering Victor Schauberger, and at the same time, I was introduced and started working with my first water structuring technology from Austria. So back then we called it water energizing, but the buzzword these days is structuring. So I'll go with that.
Okay.
Yeah, just the whole thing of water being alive or dead just enamored me. And you know, I was having some of my own personal health issues at that time as well. And I correlated directly the change in the quality of water that I was drinking in improving my health. And just became just fascinated and devoted to Schauberger's work and to becoming a researcher, a water quality researcher.
Excellent. So I think the best way to start for people that are listening to us that might not understand what structured water is. Can one of you just explain structured water compared to like what comes out of our tap?
Yeah, I think I'm going to start out a little bit, and then I'll bring Carly in here. You know, I really like relating to water as it being alive or dead.
Okay.
And you know, it's a sacred living substance, and many people are familiar with the work of Masaru Emoto. It came out back in 2000, his books, Messages from Water, that show the crystals, water crystals, the frozen water crystals. But before that was Theodor and Wolfram Schwenk from Herrischri, Germany, and their Institute for Flow Sciences. And they were the very first to depict in photos live water versus dead water. And I've got some originals that I brought back from Germany here that I'll show you. This is a droplet of water impacting another droplet of water under magnification. And this water was taken from the Black Forest in Germany from a stream. And which one looks alive to you?
Wow, wow, what a difference.
Yeah, so this was a water sample taken upstream before the stream came in contact with the village, okay? And this sample was taken downstream after it had been exposed to pollutants and effluent from the town sewage and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so just for those that are listening and not watching, one looks like a beautiful bloomed of a flower and one looks like a dead tire.
You know, there's an expression in the pictures. So one is flatlined, there's no expression, whereas the live water has all these beautiful rosettas. Sorry, not risottas, rosettas.
Rosettas, yeah.
Rosettas. So, or spiral or vortexing patterns that emanate from the center and outward. So,
what creates that?
Excuse me?
What creates that beautiful pattern? Is it the minerals and the energy in the water?
It's the energy in the water. It's the water being alive, actually.
Wow.
It's conducting information and energy. Water's a lot like a CD or a cassette tape. It holds information and conducts information on an electromagnetic level. So just as it can carry physical constituents, it also carries electromagnetic information as well. So, you know, getting back to, you know, structured water, live water, it's really important to our personal health. And we'll maybe get into that a little later. Carly, I'll let you take it from there.
Right, so a very simple explanation of structured water versus unstructured water, what we consider regular sort of tap water, which in the scientific community we refer to as bulk water. It's actually the way that the hydrogen and oxygen arrange themselves. So bulk water, the water from your tap, sort of what we consider regular water that we're taught in school, is just a random assortment of hydrogen and oxygen. It doesn't have any pattern or order to its arrangement. It's just sort of this random conglomeration. Structured water is like a liquid crystal. It actually has its hydrogen and oxygen arranged in repeating patterns. And these patterns are flexible and fluid and capable of change. So with new information, those patterns can rearrange themselves. But they're more like a crystal lattice and less like some random assortment. That structure, those patterns are what allow water to hold information, conduct energy and information, and create those beautiful images that you see from photographic researchers like Schwenk and Emoto.
So I would assume from what you're saying then, as we absorb this water, good or bad, but as we absorb the better structured water, there's more availability for us, like that's bioavailable. Is that the idea of?
Absolutely.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
wow.
right. Well, that structure is actually really necessary for our bodies. So our bodies are composed by molecule count, not by weight, but by molecule count. We are over 99% water. And it's not bulk water, it is structured water. Our water inside of our body has those geometric patterns and organizations. It's what maintains the integrity of our cells. It's what surrounds our DNA and maintains their integrity. It's what keeps our telomeres from fraying too quickly. So that's why, right. That's why
I'm aging.
Really important. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when we look at things like disease, diabetes, HIV, different pathologies in the body, what we find across the board is that they all have this loss of structure in the cells. So as soon as we begin to lose the structure of our water inside of our body, our health begins to degrade.
Wow. So my next question would be, how does water lose its structure? I'm sure there's a million ways, but I'm thinking that the tap water I'm having is not the beautiful spring water that we might see that's running through the mountains and all the layers of rock and mineral. That's probably the good water.
Yeah.
And how do we lose it along the way?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nevin.
Yeah, you know, the transportation of water through pipes is very unnatural. So that goes a long ways in degrading water's energetic quality. Definitely. The packaging, exposure to even plastic containers, fluorescent lights, all these things work to energetically decrease the quality of water that we're drinking, and or, you know, maybe it just doesn't have it in the first place because it's coming from a municipality, or maybe it was taken from a well. There's a lot of different ways that water loses its life force and its energy. And, you know, getting back to more of the health connection and what's happening in the body and the body's ability to facilitate the cellular hydration, because when it comes to aging and disease, that all comes down to what's happening in our bodies on the cellular level. So Carly can speak to the clusters. It's really what's happening to the cells, and the arrangement of the clusters or the size of the clusters, okay? So if the water's not living or structured, that means that it has large clusters, crystalline clusters that the cells can't receive. So
Yeah.
the body has to exert energy to break down the cluster sizes. In 1992, there was a John Hopkins researcher. His name's Peter Aguirre, and he discovered that the cells have a fatty membrane that surround them, and that fatty membrane determines what passes in and out of the cells, and how, and basically the health of the cells' ability to detoxify and or to transport water in and out of the cells. And there's little pathways in that in the aquaporins of the fatty membrane of the cells, and unless the water is of a structure, of a good quality structure or living water, it's not going to get into the cells. So Carly, can you talk a little bit about the clusters?
Yeah, well, and I'd also just like to comment quickly on the original question of how it loses its structure. I think one of the main ways that water loses structure that it might have had is through contamination. Whether that contamination is a chemical contamination or an energetic contamination, water is incredibly responsive. It is so responsive. It's responsive to light, to sound, to consciousness, to magnetism, electromagnetic frequencies, chemical contaminants and exposure. It is incredibly responsive. So everything that we do to water, when you think of what it goes through in the municipalities, the amount of disinfecting agents, the amount of contamination from agricultural and industrial manufacturing, our water is really, really, really contaminated. And that makes it very difficult for restructuring. It has to be completely purified and remineralized and go through a structuring process to be brought back to life. But that is largely how I think water does become dead. And we use that term dead because it doesn't contain information and it doesn't support life. So those are pretty important aspects of water for not just our bodies, but flora and fauna across the planet.
Yeah, and and our body, if we're drinking a dead water, then the body's having to exert extra energy to digest or rearrange that water so it can utilize it. Whereas inherently, by design, our body is meant to be nourished energetically and physically by the water that we drink and be fed on that subtle energetic level.
I'm a little bit curious. So I was on well water for, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And I always thought, well, that's so much better than municipal water, which I think it would be. But is even the well water that we find in our homes, is it structured in any way because it comes through the mountains, or, but I guess it's getting it could get agricultural.
It often gets agricultural. Most of our groundwater, and depending on how deep your well is, right? So when we
Right.
talk about well water, there's a lot of variables. Where is the well? How high are you? What kind of ag practices are going on around you? How deep is the well? What minerals is it filtering through as it comes up? So there's a lot of variables. I can't comment
Right.
on one specific well. Generally speaking, though, our water has reached a critical contamination crisis just across the map, whether it's groundwater, well water, tap water, or bottled water. Our level of contamination is extremely high. So with well water, you're primarily looking for things like lead, arsenic, manufacturing chemicals, hexavalent chromiums, those kinds of things are present in many of our wells today.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and inherently, a well water, from a natural science perspective, Victor Schauberger, is an immature water. We're taking it from the earth before it wants to be taken.
Right.
Oh.
So that water would be maturing underground and be caught in the water cycle, which would help it mature and help it to become structured as it was filtered through minerals, as it found its way eventually to a natural TrueSpring site, through the natural processes. Us digging it down and pulling up that water before it goes through those processes prevents it from reaching its full level of maturity.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually, when you say it that way, because it hasn't finished its path.
That's right.
Right? Like
it's process.
Its own growth. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's a growing process, just like a fruit or a vegetable. You wouldn't eat it before it was mature and ripe.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So where is there's got to still be pure water somewhere, is there?
Or mature water or a ripe water. And that's what Victor Schauberger identified as being a true spring. So you have the difference between a seepage spring or a true spring. A seepage spring, the water travels to a certain depth inside the earth. It hits a rocky layer and then comes back to the surface. Whereas a true spring comes from very, very deep in the earth. It comes into contact with the molten layers, it's purified, and under pressure pushed back up to the surface. But it's really that journey from deep in the earth where it's been purified to the surface where it's matured and ripened.
Understood. Wow.
Right. So there are true springs located throughout the world. Now, of course, we're not in a position where we can go, harvest water from a true spring, or even bottling that water from a true spring and purchasing it. That's not the answer. So, really what people need to look for is a way to create that at home through purification systems, through remineralization systems, and things that involve a structural interface activity for the water to structure around. That becomes a whole other world where we have a lot of reverse osmosis systems that don't work in real world conditions, or are really only effective for certain contaminants and not others. We have about 200 or so unregulated contaminants that exist in approximately 85% of our water that are just unregulated. So we really need a quality reverse osmosis system, and then a really broad spectrum remineralization system in order to recreate that kind of water at home, which is what Nevin specializes in.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about personal health and how all of this water affects everything else, like us. And I've already heard aging. I'm assuming dehydration,
Yes.
right? Because it's not really giving us what we need.
Yeah. I'm going to start and let Carly pick up from me. You know, really, you know, as peoples, as health professionals, as we are in the world in understanding our health and medicine, the water that we drink, the quality of the water that we drink on a daily basis is hugely overlooked and underappreciated. And it's also misunderstood in being a connection to our optimal health. I think it's something like 80% of the population is what is called subclinically dehydrated. Okay, so really what's happened is we have lost track of our potential of health. Okay, so in our modern world, we've accepted this decreased quality of health and longevity, where actually we have a far greater capacity of health, longevity, quality of longevity, free of disease than we understand ourselves to have. So, and where water comes in is what we were mentioning earlier, is your cellular hydration. Is your body getting the water that it needs? Are the cells being hydrated the way that they're meant to be hydrated?
Wow.
What I want the listeners to consider is that inherently, by design, by God's creation, however you want to look at it, we have a far greater potential of health and longevity than what is average or commonly considered.
Right, that makes so much sense. This is just so reminiscent of everything I learned just when I was in the organic food world about the uptake and the purity of your food. And although there's food out there, I heard a quote, his name's totally escaping me right now, Michael Pollock, I think, wrote in one of his books, don't quote me on that, that said like an apple, it used to be like an apple a day kept the doctor away, and now it takes 3 apples to give you the same nutritional value. Because of what's the uptake, it's not there. So we're eating like these empty calories, and we think that we're eating healthy,
Right.
but it's just not there anymore because it's based on like old belief systems of what's in our food, and it's
Exactly.
just totally been destroyed. And it sounds like our water is exactly the same.
It's an environmental phenomena, you know.
Wow.
Much of my background is also organic farming, Camille. Nutrient density is the whole thing. And yes, our food needs to be organic and clean and free of chemicals, but it also needs to be nutrient dense.
Yeah, which is why so many people are feeling hungry and they're really just starving for nutrients. And it's so hard to tell people, well, if you go organic, you'll just eat less. You just will.
Right, and
because your body won't starve. So water sounds the same.
It is very much the same. And
wow.
I would in fact argue that water is our greatest source of toxic exposure, more so than our food. So when you really take a look at the contamination level of our water system, it gets really scary really fast. And most people are simply unaware of it because look, it looks like a clear cup of water. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's there. Just because the apple looks the same doesn't mean that it packs the same amount of
exactly.
It's not loaded with pesticides and herbicides or fungicides. So as you know from your background in food, you can take those same concepts and apply them to water, and it fits very well. I think, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm curious because, of course, I used to read it in food. There's got to be that in water as well. Like I used to read this, the instant change in people, or even their toxicity levels of pesticides and herbicides when they just went to organic food for a week, say, and you can see it in blood levels. Have the same type of tests been done with structured water?
So we can find the same type of tests that are done with at least a purified water.
Okay.
Where we can see the different level of contaminations and the detox processes that begins to happen when you start drinking quality water. Unfortunately,
Wow.
most people in America will spend their entire life without ever drinking a cup of clean, pure, healthful water, which is really sad. This is one of our most basic needs, right? But our pollution has just become so systemic that, you know,
Agreed.
it's unavoidable unless people are really going to invest in being able to create something at home. You know, they're stuck with what comes out of their tap, which is very sad. And
Right.
so in addition to the toxic exposure, and you've got good detoxing that can happen just like when you start eating organic foods and you reduce your pesticide consumption. When you provide your body with a healthful, bioavailable, structured quality water, you do begin to experience those detox processes, and the body can become much healthier, much more quickly. But going back to the hydration level, you know, between a 1% and 2% change in your level of hydration has drastic effects on your cognitive abilities, your sleep, your energy, endurance, stamina, disease resistance, immune strength. It really across the board affects the body because essentially everything in the body happens in, through, and because of water. So it really is the foundation that we build our health.
So I'm just thinking with all the increase in drinking water, like over the last decade or so, like my kids, like everyone carries water with them
Right.
now, that they're really, in a sense, they could actually be more toxic instead of like they're doing it for the health of it,
Right.
but they can actually be putting more toxins in their system from drinking so much dirty water.
Right, because
Right.
it's quality over quantity. Right?
Yeah.
Nevin, did you have something to add there?
No, that's great, Carly. Thank you.
Yeah. So
That's-
it is quality over quantity at that point. Quality water is what our cells really require in order to stay nourished, to protect our DNA, to maintain information transfer, even to maintain enzymatic actions. You know, our enzymes, action of all of our enzymes is critical upon our hydration levels. So all of that becomes effective really quickly.
Okay, so I do a lot of reading like on our microbiome and all of the bacteria in our bodies that's supposed to be there. Can a bad water quality throw off that as well? It would seem like it would.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Things like candida even can really thrive on a poor
That
quality.
makes sense.
When we have a highly structured water, a very mineralized structured water, our body is able to maintain the balance that it needs to have very effectively. It's how we were created and evolved over, you know, all of this
Right.
time.
So what's an average homeowner able to do about getting this type of purity? I guess a purifying system.
Sure. Yeah. It's a great question. It's an important question. It's, you know, it's really up to people, you know, how important is their health? So, for instance, you know, most of my clients are people that really are like extreme health geeks.
Yeah.
And they're really wanting to push the envelope of their health and longevity, and or they're into preventative medicine. That's a big conversation. Is, you know, what are we doing now earlier in life to make the quality of our later years superior, and not have the issues later in life, the preventative medicine. So what I've found in my 25 years of researching water technologies is that there's no one best system in the world. So that's a big issue. And part of it is considering really how severe our water quality issues are with the water that's being delivered to our homes. So I've scoured the earth and the water technologies industry to find the very finest components available in the world. And I'm configuring a custom drinking water system. And the jug of water that I sent you, Camille, is a sample from that system.
Okay. That was so good. Like it tasted different. It was really, I was surprised actually. Like I expected it would be like bottled water, which I don't drink. So, yeah, one, the plastic, but two, it never really tasted that good and I was worried what was in it. At least water from my homes I've tested, but it was so good, like crazy good, and like so clear tasting, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, it probably does to you, but
yeah.
it was really good.
People notice not just how it tastes, but how it feels and how it just really jumps into their palate. Often, you know, people notice the way the water going down, that it starts to get absorbed into the body's tissues in the mouth and in the throat. And by the time it gets down, you know, the esophagus, most of it's already been absorbed by the body. So it's pretty remarkable that way. I guess out of selfishness, you know, I've been on this quest of trying to discern the best drinking water system in the world, and I feel like I have, and I know that I have. Absolutely, I can quantify that on a lot of levels, and now I'm offering it. Carly and I are offering it to the world. So
Fabulous.
And Nevin actually reached out to me after reading the book. So I have tried many different systems, many different waters, and his water is the only one that has ever impressed me, which is why I joined up with him, because I was desperately looking for solutions for people and a way to give them access to what they really need, which was a quality water.
Wow.
That we're drinking from our tap. The bottled water is an unregulated industry. And again, back to our ground and well water, all of these waters available to the public are really just a plethora of toxicity and cancer-causing contaminants. And so I was searching for something that was structured, was mineralized, and was purified. And I found that with the system. So that I advocate.
This has been really a fascinating talk today. It really has. And like opened my eyes to a lot of what's going on. Even though I read your materials and looked through the book and did all of it, talking kind of like is like that aha of it. You know, it's like, wow, this is another thing I put in my body that's not good. And you think you're so healthful. At least I try to be. Is there anything I missed asking you about that's important for our audience to know? Or did we cover pretty much everything? I felt it was a pretty good talk.
It's a great talk.
Okay, good.
There's
great talk.
so many different avenues that you could go down with water. There's many different facets to it.
Yeah.
You know, of course, coming from your background in organic foods, you already have such a grasp on what nutrient density is and bioavailability.
Yeah.
All of that really helps to be able to understand what it is that we're really talking about. So
absolutely. Well, thank you so much. So if people are listening to this later, and they will, what's the best way to get in touch with you? Here, I'll show you book one more time. Oh, there it is. Water codes?
Yeah, water codes. So I do have a website, watercodes.com. And you can also reach me at my email, which is just carly@watercodes.com.
Excellent. And Nevin, how about you?
Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to mention for your listeners.
Okay.
A couple of documentaries I want to plug. One is called Tapped, and that goes inside and exposes the bottled water industry. Very highly recommend if people want to understand their health and what's happening with the bottled water thing, that they watch the documentary Tapped. And another documentary is called The Great Culling. These are both on YouTube. The Great Culling exposes the fluoridation of our tap water and the health concerns with that. So two really, Carly highly recommends both of these documentaries, Tapped and The Great Culling. To get a hold of me, you can email me, Nevin at TrueSpring, TRUEST, spring.com, or you can reach me toll free, 885-73-8989. 88.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for being on our show today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having us, Camille. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Camille.